Just a reminder, you can subscribe to this show through iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Please consider leaving a review on those services if you can. This episode was originally recorded on Monday, August 17th, and while they still haven't announced any new Adult Swim originals, new updates are still being released by Adult Swim Canada, so follow that on social media if you want the latest information. Anyway, I'm Jesse Betteridge. Welcome to Zonen Canada. Joining me today once again is Karl Olson, also known as nerdcore rapper Ultraklystron.
Hi, everybody.
And joining us for the first time, somebody who has been wanting to come on the show for quite a while now. He's an animation storyboarder, Corey Barnes.
Hey, everyone.
So the main topic of this episode is going to be Adult Swim, specifically how Adult Swim just kind of doesn't seem to work outside of the United States for some reason. And the two of you have some fairly direct connections to Adult Swim. Corey, you've worked on a few shows for the network in the past, right?
Yeah, I was a storyboard artist / supervisor / board director on China, Illinois for seasons 1 and 2, and I also worked on season 3 of Superjail. And I may have worked on a pilot for them. I don't know if it was for them or not, but that was a lot of that was during my time at Titmouse. But yeah, I've done plenty of work for Adult Swim.
Yeah, lots of pilots were coming out of Titmouse over the last few years.
Yeah, a lot of them were for Spike TV. But yeah, like, you know, Adult Swim's always got pilots in development somewhere.
Spike TV they always seem to want to give animation another try for some reason.
Yeah, and
they until they're Esquire.
Wait, what?
Or wouldn't Spike TV become Esquire, or am I confusing stations?
No, that's G4.
G4, whatever.
Yeah.
Dude, a dude channel became a different dude channel.
Exactly, yeah. In the States, G4 became Esquire. In Canada, we still have G4, but I suspect it's going to be gone pretty soon. I don't think it's going to survive the big pick and pay purge.
Well, not a lot of people here miss G4.
I doubt that.
But Ninja Warrior.
No.
Literally the only thing even passable on G4.
And Karl, you also have a little bit of a direct tie to Adult Swim programming in your past as well, don't you?
Yeah, I made fun of C-Lab Season 3 by the request of the creators of the show on their DVD commentary, because they apparently couldn't find anybody in Atlanta who was able to come in for it. So I'm like, I have a home studio, and I can make fun of your show, and so I did.
You just offered over the internet, or did you actually like?
They jumped on the Toon Zone forums asking if there was anybody in Atlanta who could do it, and at the time there wasn't anybody who had the time, because I'm pretty sure that we had board members who were there, but otherwise didn't have the interest or guts or wherewithal to do it. And I'm like, if you don't mind sending me a tape, I can make fun of an episode of your show. It's no big deal.
By the way, I was one of those people who wasn't interested.
But
you were there. You were there for school at the time, and you could.
Yeah, and I also didn't realize that years later I would be working for those guys on Archer.
That's right.
But they never asked Karl to come back for another commentary again.
Well, they make good shows now.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Good, but well, I mean, yeah, Teletoon did avoid C-Lab for how many years? We never really understood what was going on with that one. They ran Brack and they still run Brack into the ground. That thing runs on Adult Swim Canada 4 times a night.
Wow.
But yeah, they never really gave C-Lab a fair shake, and they always ran Frisky Dingo in the wrong order.
It's too bad because Frisky Dingo was great.
But they love Archer though. So anyway, before we really get into the Adult Swim stuff, there's just one other little thing I wanted to touch on. I went to Anime Revolution, a con in Vancouver this past week, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I thought it was a pretty good show. I think a lot of people are still kind of turned off from Vancouver cons just because there's so much ridiculous drama going on with that kind of thing here. There's kind of a con civil war going on. We got Anime Revolution and Anime Evolution both a month apart, which is, I think that kind of says it all right there. But yeah, I mean, one con collapsed and then Anime Revolution started up. Business people who have a lot of money started a very ambitious con, and It's picked up a lot of steam over the past couple years. It's gotten pretty big. They focus on two things. They have the ridiculously expensive Vancouver Convention Center venue. Not even the biggest wing of it, just kind of like the smaller east wing. And it's a beautiful area and definitely a nice place to take pictures and stuff. They bring in lots of high-profile guests from Japan. And that's, where a lot of their focus goes on, is just kind of accommodating these guests. And if you're from outside of Vancouver and you've been curious about the con, I'd say it's safe to check out at this point. Just know it's, guests focused, and they might nickel and dime you for a lot of bullshit. They were charging extra for the concert, which was kind of bullshit, I think. I was gonna say, Karl, also, they didn't have those Itashas this year.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna guess they sold them.
I hope they sold them with the wrap still on, and somewhere around here in the Lower Mainland is somebody driving around an Anime Revolution 2014.
Yep. I don't think it wasn't year specific, was it?
I don't know, but it would be like, even if it's not year specific, it's just the idea that there's somebody driving around with like Itashas for a anime con in Vancouver. Oh, like it almost makes up for seeing all the Lamborghinis and other exotics with like learner stickers on it around here.
Whether people like it or not, Anime Revolution is a convention that is befitting of Vancouver, for better or worse.
It is the Vancouverist con.
Yeah, and Sci-Fi Real Estate Guy was back this year.
Like, was he dressed as Gendo?
He was dressed as Gendo, selling real estate in the dealer's hall at Anime Revolution.
Christ.
I love that. I think it's great. Yeah.
To Vancouver. Pull up.
The guest Q&A and all that stuff was really good. One complaint I do have about the con is the fan panels. They're not really interesting. A lot of the fan panels aren't really related to anime, and it's still plagued with Ask a Character panels, which I think a lot of cons are starting to crack down on. I know Anime North has pretty much banned them. They're leaning at an 18+ content. So, I mean, if you're in the Pacific Northwest area and you want to do 18+ stuff, AR is probably a better option than Sakura-Con, because they've become a little notorious for being for cracking down on that a little more than they need to. Still got nothing on Otakuthon in Montreal, though. Otakuthon has like this impossible hentai sex positions panel where they try to imitate sex positions from hentai to hilarious effect. That is quality 18+ content. That's the kind of thing that I think that our cons need. But the non-18+ stuff at AR was pretty bad, I thought. But with the exception of my panels, which I thought went very well, I did a panel on Friday about Satoshi Kon. It didn't really attract a huge crowd, but the crowd that was there was enthusiastic. I thought it went over pretty well. I also did my Adventures in Anime on Canadian TV panel, which I've done a couple times before, mainly in the US, and something interesting happened there. Usually during that panel, there's a bit where I like to riff on Spider Riders, because it's, even though it's a kid show, it's pretty easy to riff on. But I got a pretty strong blowback from a few people in the audience. Because, well, what do you know? Spider Riders is now actually old enough that people are nostalgic for it. I guess I have to be a little more considerate of that in the future.
I feel like maybe this audience doesn't need the fill-in, but they should know that like Spider Riders was a Canadian-Japanese co-pro with B-Train at B-Train's most B-Trainiest.
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of like a Canadian IGPX in a way, I guess.
Except not good.
I haven't seen IGPX. I don't really know. I mean, does it good?
IGPX is. I liked IGPX, and there was obviously okay. There was definitely like effort put into it, and from what I saw of Spiders Riders, it was like, well, you can put it this way: one was made by Production IG and borrowed animators off of a lot of top-notch studios as well, and one was not. It was made by B-Train.
Yeah, and IGPX was made for like a significant amount of money especially for an anime series at the time. They said the budget was similar to that of Standalone Complex.
I didn't know they put that much into it.
Yeah, it looks it. It definitely looks it.
But another funny thing about Spider Riders is that it's owned by DHX, who also owns Family Channel and Disney XD right now. But DHX has lost the Disney license. Chorus has picked that up. that means that Disney XD is going to be kind of high and dry in the future. Apparently they're rebranding it as Family Extreme, so they're probably going to be digging pretty deep in their libraries for more content. So we might see Spider Riders make a resurgence on Family Extreme in the near future. I think that could be something to look forward to.
I'm going to have trouble taking that name seriously. Family Extreme.
No, that's terrible. I was thinking you were going to talk about Spider Riders, which the best part was in the promos for it was inconsistently called Spider Riders or Spiders Riders.
Shit, really?
Like plural.
I thought you were just doing that for...
No. That was from an ad. That was from an actual ad run for it. Spiders Riders. Not even kidding.
I mean, when Inuyasha first aired on YTV, they pronounced it Inuyasha, but I mean, I guess I can kind of understand that.
That's not their show, as opposed to the show which they commissioned.
Also, there's like the title is Spider Riders. There's no S after Spider. Like you're throwing in an extra letter. It's not like Inuyasha where you can understand that mispronunciation, but it's Spider Riders, not Spiders Riders.
One is a person who are people who ride spiders, Spider Riders. One are the people who ride spiders, Spiders Riders. They're the riders owned by the spiders.
See, we're having an involved semantic debate over this. Just imagine how someone who's truly nostalgic for the show actually feels about this issue.
Yeah.
I would be awesome if there was a fight in the fan base over which one was correct.
Yeah, like the Berenstain Bears thing, but with Spider Riders.
Oh my god. We have in Universe A it was Spider Riders, in Universe B it was Spiders Riders.
Calling all spiders riders.
And Drake didn't do that theme song, just in case anybody was wondering.
Oh, if only.
Yeah.
Only. I'm just thinking about Drake singing a song about Spider Riders. Got the Spider Riders going back to back.
Well, that's the funny thing is that it, like where his career was at that time, it would have fit.
It would have been totally plausible.
Yeah.
I think even though he mentions Degrassi now, he never mentioned Spider Riders. Like you never hear him rolling through the six, do the Spider Rider open theme.
In universe, I'm sure in Universe C he did do the theme song. So many possibilities.
No, he had Quentin Miller ghostwrite the theme song.
In an awkward segue from that Disney license I mentioned that DHX lost, it got picked up by Chorus, which means that they now have, the monopoly on the big US kids brands. They've got Cartoon Network, they've got Nickelodeon, and they've got Disney. This is resulting in a giant mad shuffle that's going on right now. That's going to affect Adult Swim Canada in a few ways. I don't know if a lot of people have been following this, but Adult Swim Canada, it launched back in 2012, and it's pretty much been a huge disappointment since the very beginning. Most of its content is from no later than 2008. They did eventually air Venture Brothers Season 4. That was considered a big deal, and yet they still didn't promote it on the air or on social media at all. Even massive hits like Rick and Morty, which I should point out gets significantly higher ratings in the States than Archer does, have been absolutely nowhere to be seen. And the whole thing has basically just been running on autopilot. They occasionally have some interstitials from the States. And like I said before, they run the Brack show 4 times a night because maybe it's just people are nostalgic for Brack show in Canada and can't get enough of it because it's just been run into the ground so much up until now.
Yeah, that channel is like clearly the Brack show's biggest fan on like a global scale. I've never seen any other channel that runs the Brack show so much. A show that ended 12 years ago.
Adult Swim itself, even when they didn't have enough content to program the block 2 nights a week, did not run the Brack show that much.
Teletoon aired Brack show before they aired Space Ghost Coast to Coast too. So.
Yeah, but that's like licensing nonsense.
It was.
Yeah, there's no legal issues with the Brack show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but anyway, like Adult Swim Canada, the whole block, and up here it is indeed just treated like a block, whereas in the States it is a network unto itself that shares space with Cartoon Network. The whole block was seemingly abandoned, not too long after it launched. Earlier this year, in February, its Facebook page and its Twitter disappeared without a trace or explanation. And that's a big contrast to the Cartoon Network portion, or the Cartoon Network Canada portion of the station, which is actually pretty great. It has day-and-date premieres of all the CN originals. And they got everything. Steven Universe, Clarence, Teen Titans Go, all that stuff. But unfortunately, the biggest drawback, for both, was that availability was really poor. For some reason, it hasn't been on Shaw or Rogers, so it's actually not available to the majority of Canadians right now who have cable. But with the changes that are going on at Chorus, due to the Disney Channel launching, it's going to be reaching more eyeballs now, because there's some shuffling going on. Teletoon Retro, which launched 7 years ago, is now being phased out, and Cartoon Network Canada is actually going to take its place.
Which is weird, because that's Teletoon Retro is on some very basic packages up here.
Teletoon Retro, I think, is actually more widely available than regular Teletoon is right now.
I would lean on that, because I get my cable through my landlord, and he has the most super basic package for cable. And yeah, I get Teletoon Retro. I don't get Teletoon. I do get YTV, but yeah, I don't actually get the network proper, but I get Retro, which is great because I love watching Gem reruns and Ninja Turtles, because that's a lot of what they run. That and Mighty Hercules.
A lot of Mighty Hercules, I know.
Yeah, like I Jerry Beck would be in heaven, because they run some classic junk cartoons.
Yeah, it kind of sucks to see that station go, but I mean, a lot has changed since the station first launched. I mean, when it first launched, people had not seen G.I. Joe or stuff like that in years, just because the licenses had all been tied up with rights holders and toy companies and things like that. Like that content just wasn't available. People hadn't seen that content in years, and it's just over the past 6 or 7 years, it's just kind of flooded everywhere. You can see that stuff on every streaming service. There are way more efficient ways of watching Gem now, to say the least.
Another thing is, besides having better carriage, it's had better packaging and presentation than a lot of Canadian television, and did pretty much from square one. Like, they had a real sense of presenting a retro flavor.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The flip clock. They had this whole flip clock motif initially, and even as they switched up their branding in the past couple of years, still very smart, very well done.
Yeah, they keep it cohesive, even though they're targeting a bunch of different nostalgic audiences at once.
Yes,
and it was a lot of people considered Teletoon Retro to be a highlight on Canadian TV, because they kept it going for so long.
A while, I actually have to say it had better presentation than Boomerang by leaps and bounds.
Well, Boomerang abandoned the retro format over a decade ago.
It's been pretty overhauled. They're actually Warner Brothers Animation's producing several new shows that are going to be exclusively for Boomerang, including that Wabbit Looney Tunes show, and a couple others that escape me. I don't think that new Scooby-Doo show is one of them. I think that's going to be Cartoon Network.
Scooby-Doo manages to somehow, it doesn't get to be, it gets to be in the main line.
Yeah, but is he going to meet Kiss in the new series, though? That's what I
don't think so.
I think that was
a one-time thing. Them and the WWE.
But anyway, so what's actually happening here is that Cartoon Network Canada is going to take the place of Teletoon Retro and inherit its incredibly wide distribution. Apparently, when they first launched that station, they got incredibly cheap carriage somehow. I'm still, there's apparently a whole interesting story behind that. And the Disney Channel is going to kind of launch slowly in the background, because that thing's not going to be fully formed when it first launched, because they just got the license earlier this year. So I can only imagine what they were able to throw together in that time. The point is that Adult Swim Canada, which is attached to the later hours of Cartoon Network Canada, is now going to be reaching more eyeballs than ever. It looks like they're going to be making some changes, but it's still kind of unclear what those changes are going to be and whether or not they're really going to be substantial. Just the other week, their Facebook page and a new Twitter, which still doesn't have anything posted on it, mysteriously reappeared and said that they were going to start making new announcements starting on the 17th. We don't... So they did make their first announcement. We're recording this on Monday, August 17th, and they did make their first announcement, which was a little unexpected. It was actually a homegrown production called Night Sweats, which is compilation of comedy animated shorts with live action hosts. You guys saw the trailer for that they posted, right?
Yes, I did.
What do you make of it? I don't know.
Well, my first thought was I don't know if people have heard of this failed Teletoon pilot called Dunce Bucket, but
If
I
you've
was
seen Dunce Bucket, you certainly won't forget it.
but I was kind of reminded of that. But Dunce Bucket was like its own level of crass humor that this doesn't look like it's going to be. But that was just the first thing that came to mind was Dunce Bucket.
Yeah, Dunce Bucket was part of that Detour pilot program from 7 or 8 years ago now, which was really funny because it was all they were supposed to put all these pilots out, people would vote, and then whatever got the most votes would be made into a show. The show that got the most votes was actually Dunce Bucket. The show that should have got the most votes was Angora Napkin, but the show that actually got the most votes was Dunce Bucket, which was absolutely god-awful. Yet it was Forget About It that got made into a show in the end.
Oh.
Yeah. Which is available on Hulu here for all to see.
But Night Sweats is interesting because it was actually being developed for Teletoon originally. It was a collaboration, apparently, between the online media site Mondo and the TV channel Byte TV, which is one of those Blue Ant media stations that doesn't have a lot of advertising on it. That station is shutting down later in August, so it seems that whatever plans they had for it originally have just kind of gone out the window, and they're just re-strategizing. Like I said, lots of really unpredictable stuff is going on with these chorus networks now. To me, this is just baffling. Because you have this original show that Teletoon has put money into, and they're not using it to strengthen their Teletoon at Night brand, which right now is basically just living solely off of Archer, pretty much, which I imagine that Teletoon is paying way too much money for because it's not on FX Canada.
It won't even be on FX America.
Oh, right, yes, it's moving to FXX, right?
Yep,
that's where all the animation's being ghettoized now, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Including a new show from the creator of Archer.
Yeah, what's that one called again?
It's called Cassius and Clay, and it's made by Adam Reed and Megan Gantz, who was a writer on Community and Modern Family, I believe.
Yeah, she did after she got sick of working on Community.
Okay.
What I found interesting about Night Sweats is that it kind of rolls with this idea, and they've been doing this on Teletoon at Night as well, where it seems that Chorus seems to be convinced that millennials want more live action hosts. Like throughout adulthood, they will crave the PJ treatment to all their television, which is why they got that Fred at Night show. He doesn't seem to be a bad personality, but it's just like, why are you making this show? It just seems like such an odd kind of place to put your focus.
I seriously wonder if some of that is if we put enough wraparound on it, we can like cheat our minutes a bit. Like I wonder if some of this it's more to Canadian technically through shifty accounting.
Yeah.
I also think for the purposes of an anthology show, you either have very little in the way of wraparound, which you have an example of, a lot of examples of on like early Cartoon Network, where you had Oh Canada and all the Toon Heads, like historical animation programming that Jerry Beck put together for them. That was very, no hosts, no cartoon hosts, no nothing, just the shorts with some vague, if any, context. Or you kind of maybe, I think the other successful model of that was Kablam on Nickelodeon back in the day, where you have these bits, but they're hosted and brought together, and whether you do that with live action or not, doesn't change a lot. They seem to be going for a real pseudo Tim and Eric early $1 Million Extreme kind of flavor.
That's what it seems to be. It almost seems like they wound up with this product that was somewhere between like PJs and Tim and Eric, and just said, let's just throw this on Adult Swim. Well, I'm sure that if nothing else, it will be better than Crash Canyon, which is still on Adult Swim.
Getting tetanus is better than Crash Canyon, Jesse.
It's still running on Adult Swim Canada right now, of all places, which is just kind of
so weird. It was bad enough that was on Teletoon.
Yeah.
And since I just wrapped up work on Family Guy season 13, I can now be personally offended by that show.
Yeah, I don't blame you one bit. People can criticize Family Guy all they want, but like ripping off its style the way that Crash Canyon did, I think is, well, for one thing, I think it's grossly unethical. Their entire approach behind that show, that is just the shoddiest kind of TV production imaginable, I think.
Yeah.
So we have Night Sweats coming. Again, a really weird choice because, I mean, when you're bringing in a brand like Adult Swim, I don't understand why you would put original content on it, especially when you have your own brand that kind of needs more content on it anyway. It just makes more sense to try and bring the actual content from the States up into the Adult Swim Canada block. And to be honest, I think that by the time you're all listening to this, I mean, there very well have been more announcements made by Adult Swim Canada about their new lineup. There's been, some little teases that have come out that suggested that there's going to be a big expansion on Adult Swim Canada, and that the new content may very well be befitting of the new wider audience. But there seems to be this persistent problem with getting the actual Adult Swim content, and this goes even before Adult Swim. Even back when Teletoon was just running all this stuff on their late night blocks, they just couldn't get their hands on the stuff. And this problem, I have noticed, isn't really limited to Canada either. This seems to be a problem that Adult Swim has on an international scale. It was announced just a couple of weeks ago that there's a new Adult Swim block starting in the UK on Fox UK. And it's going to have, what are the 3 shows? Rick and Morty, Mr. Pickles, and Black Jesus. At the very least, I expect that those 3 shows are going to show up on our Adult Swim as well soon. Correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, but is this not like the 5th time that Adult Swim has tried launching a block in the UK now?
Yeah, this is the 5th time that they've started some kind of, or put their programs on in the UK in some way. The first time was on CNX. They didn't call it Adult Swim, but, they ran the early Adult Swim shows like Aqua Teen and Brack Show and C-Lab on CNX. And then that network crashed and burned. And then the Adult Swim block was brought to Bravo, and then FX, and then TCM2, and now attempt number 5, they're bringing it to Fox UK.
Is it because these networks are failing, or is it just the block can't gain traction anywhere it goes?
I wish I could figure that out myself. This seems to be an issue with them globally. Like, I know there are some countries where there are regulations where they would not be allowed to show these shows on their equivalent of their Cartoon Network, and that's understandable, and that's why in a lot of cases the shows hop to other networks. I don't know what it's on in Australia these days, for example.
I think it's kind of split in Australia. I didn't have time to do really thorough research, but apparently I believe it's SBS2 that is running a lot of the Adult Swim stuff in Australia right now. But a lot of it is also on their Comedy Network equivalent. But I was just going off of Wikipedia, and that information could be ancient. But, the situation is kind of a mess there as well. And there seems to be, again, this recurring theme where Adult Swim just can't seem to stick anywhere but the United States. I mean, do you have any idea why that might be? Do you think it's because of the content itself, or just because of the way Turner operates with this kind of thing? Because this isn't happening with Cartoon Network content. Their push for the daytime stuff is definitely sticking.
Yeah, and that has stuck since like the 90s. Like they have seemingly no trouble at all getting like their Cartoon Network originals on the air overseas, and that seems to be the case
on their own network too. Like, they have successfully pushed Cartoon Network as a brand for networks internationally. Yeah, again, since the 90s, like they without fail.
Mm-hmm. But up in Canada, like, isn't Cartoon Network Canada like actually simulcasting some of the Cartoon Network originals?
Yes, all CN originals have day and date premieres with the kids. So that's pretty good. Not a lot of networks are, even still today, not a lot of networks are pulling that off. I don't think that simulcasts are even happening outside of Canada. I think they're actually one of the few Cartoon Networks that, have it nailed down that well.
I can't really begin to speculate as to why.
I mean, does it have? Do you think it has to do with? I mean, could it have to do with just like the form of Adult Swim? Like, so much of Adult Swim relies on this kind of spontaneity that, that may very well be only possible on American TV, because American cable is so loosely regulated. The FCC has no jurisdiction over it. Whereas, say,
except for like children's television, they
Oh, right,
regulate
yeah.
advertising time.
yeah.
But when it comes to adult programming, it's they can run wild with how many commercials they want to show or the content they want to show, et cetera, et cetera. But I wish I could tell. Maybe it's the fact that a lot of Adult Swim's content is cartoons, because I imagine like AMC shows and HBO shows, like, do they get distributed overseas like with ease?
I know that in the UK at least, which is like probably usually going to be the go-to example for overseas stuff. I know a lot of their stuff actually shows up on the various BBC networks, and then some. They're like, there's no. I don't think there's an HBO UK, but
Okay.
the content shows up in different places. As far as like Adult Swim goes, you have like spontaneous stuff that I mean that this is going way back, but you have things like how when Perfect Hair Forever debuted, everyone thought it was going to be Squidbillies, and that whole joke is just sort of part of the character of those two shows, was the fact that they just so thoroughly trolled the audience with that. And then you have things like Off the Air, which I don't think is even legally possible to broadcast outside of the United States, because that it almost seems like that show in general is just kind of legally dubious in the United States itself, just because of where they're getting all this found content from.
There are like examples of Mike Tyson Mysteries, which is an Adult Swim original. It's produced and it's owned by Warner Brothers, but it actually gets like day and date premieres on Netflix, at least up in Canada.
Yeah, only in Canada. That's a really weird case there. It's like they can't figure out how to make this stuff stick in a way that anyone outside of the U.S. is really going to resonate with.
I do think the point where it's the other thing is for every show which Cartoon Network might have some sort of lock, stock, and barrel rights to, and thus would be easy to integrate into the Adult Swim international lineups. There's stuff that very clearly has other production companies involved. So whether they are the ones who get to say where it goes or what writers exist on then re-picking up for international broadcast and all this stuff, I think gets complicated. I think the fact that Children's Hospital now is running on Canada on Much.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize that.
I thought it was. Well, but the thing is that ends up being that possibility. You take a look at, for example, it's like, well, maybe we aren't going to get Loiter Squad because it's actually Dick House Productions. So who knows how they cut their rights for that for international or what.
But in the case of Loiter Squad too, like Dick House Productions doesn't own any copyrights. In fact, it actually switched over to Gorilla Flicks or whatever Jeff Tremaine's company was in season 3.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference between Loiter Squad is, at the end of the day, is still owned. It's the property of Cartoon Network. Children's Hospital is actually the property of Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much a difference that makes between the two, because as far as I know, Warner Brothers is like the international is the one who handles international distribution for a lot of those Turner properties. But I've never known or even gotten any hints of who is the handler for like specifically Adult Swim stuff, even though technically it is the property of Cartoon Network.
So much of this stuff, the rights are divided in very, very weird ways, because you have a mess of production companies behind each of these Adult Swim shows. I guess.
Can I interject? A lot of those quote unquote production companies are just vanity cards.
Yeah.
They don't mean a thing.
Yeah.
They're just they're just something that like an executive producer gets to slap on the show, just because that's a thing with American television. You see it all over primetime.
Well, okay, but ultimately a lot of this stuff goes through Turner, and I mean, could their wheeling, the way they do wheeling and dealing on an international scale, I mean, could that have something to do with this? Because they kind of have weird approaches to these weird, inconsistent approaches to this stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff isn't even available on DVD here. Rick and Morty. I mean, not only is that not broadcasting up here, it's not streaming. You can't go to Best Buy or HMV and buy the DVD or Blu-ray because, unlike Cartoon Network shows, they're not actually distributing them, or you have to import it, which you can do through Amazon.ca, so it's not hard to get. But, I mean, it's not being directly made legally available here at all, which is kind of ironic because it's animated here by Bardell Studios.
By Bardell, yep.
And it's like they're definitely getting a lot of people on staff for that just through their passion for a show that they can't even watch legally until months later when the home video release is finally out.
Okay. I will say, I wonder if any of it has to do with the fact that Adult Swim shows are typically made in smaller quantities than Cartoon Network shows. Like Cartoon Network they'll order like 20 or more half hours a year of one of their shows, whereas Adult Swim may, for some of its shows, order like a quarter of that.
Well, that's the whole. That's the whole thing. Is that they're small orders of seasons, and the the shows themselves are only 11 minutes long most of the time.
Yeah, which strikes me as this huge shift to even see like Children's Hospital is being scheduled as 11-minute block, as those 15-minute slots on Much, and they've got a couple of other things that are running as 15s, like this fake news, this E-Entertainment parody, which I think may also be an Adult Swim thing. Or
do you know what the name of it is?
Shoot off a name, I'll probably know it.
Hot Package.
Yeah, maybe. No, it's not Hot Package. It's
all right. So it's not that's Adult Swim's.
Hot Package is not up here, I believe.
Yeah, which is funny because it's made by Derek Beckles of TV Carnage, which is Canadian.
Oh yeah.
Again, no, this being an ongoing thing with Cartoon Network getting really wonderful stuff made in Canada, and then it never seeing the light of day in Canada.
Yeah, there's that definitely that level of irony to it, but it almost seems like the shows aren't compatible with the way we do TV here, because I don't know how much this is true for other countries, but certainly in Canada, all these cable stations, going back to the whole regulation thing, you have to have a license, you have to follow those conditions of license, and when your broadcasting strategy has to conform to like certain codes or expectations, it doesn't leave a lot of room for the flexibility and spontaneity that kind of characterizes Adult Swim. Isn't that what makes Adult Swim different from other television networks in the States? Like the length, the way the ads are set up, because there's no actual commercial interruption during most of the shows, at least the shorter ones.
Yeah, if they run ads every 15 minutes, which is something that a lot of cable channels, and traditional free over-the-air television gave up at the turn of the millennium. I think Adult Swim
before that even. I remember Nick was running I think on the 3 ad break thing by the time certainly by the time Cartoon Network got wider carriage, Nick had already given it up, which was one of the really distinguishing things. Was here you had Cartoon Network not only just to the point where it's you had the only basically what amounted to 2 ad breaks, and that being awkward because then Cartoon Network almost had to do the interstitials to fill time. Right, because you still had shows that maybe only timed out to 22, right? It's weird to think.
Are you talking about Cartoon Network US or Canada? I'm sorry.
US.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They had plenty of interstitials. Yeah. They have to fill time if the show's too short because there's only so many ads they can run anyway.
Yeah. That's the whole thing about Adult Swim, is that it's not just about the individual shows or the content, it's about the flow of the whole thing. That's what creates the Adult Swim experience. And when you take the things out of context, then suddenly it doesn't really work.
Yeah, I think it may be one of the issues in trying to make Adult Swim work internationally is that you can't cut any one corner and still have it work. You have to have all the packaging, you have to have all the shows, you have to have the flexibility in saying that at 4 a.m. we're going to run a 11-minute opening credits parody that turns into a hyperviolent nightmare, and have that just be cool. There's a lot of just it's not that necessarily any one of these things is distinctly Adult Swim, but the package certainly is what brings it together. And if you have to, if you can't have all the shows, or you have to make concessions and you'd kind of have to just if you could rebroadcast the block straight, it would probably work.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that would
very hard to make that work.
Yeah, it's just networks in other countries, they get the rights to Adult Swim, but it's they don't know how to put it together. They don't know how the parts fit together. They don't know what it's emulating and trying to parody. Look at Tim and Eric. The show got distributed widely around the world, but I'm not convinced that most people who watched it around the world really understood it. Because it's so fixated on things that are specifically American. All this,
I think it did really well up here in Canada, but it's only because Canada gets a huge dose of content from the States, and I think anybody else who would have enough of an affinity anybody who would watch Tim and Eric and enjoy it probably was already somewhat of an Americanophile of some sort, even if they're not getting the same dosage of American content. They're familiar culturally with its like grotesque tropes and what am I looking for? Shadow culture.
Shadow culture, exactly. Mm-hmm. You had to be familiar with things like, you know, low budget ads or public access TV. That, you know, a lot of that stuff barely exists in Canada, but it's very prominent when you watch. I mean, that's the big difference between American and Canadian TV. A lot of the time is all that weird little ephemera that's scattered around, and that's kind of what Adult Swim is, like a kind of almost like kind of a dark mirror of. And I think that's kind of an element that other countries can't quite emulate properly.
Well, there's definitely an aspect of it's a lot easier to, you know, it says a lot that when Toonami was in its original run, they did a pretty good job of making that work on other Cartoon Networks with different lineups, you know, different anime lineups.
There's a whole channel in Asia.
Yeah. And it like that works just fine. Like it's totally viable. Because as much as it's also, again, about some components of the experience kind of thing, it's still not so wrapped up around certain semiotic touchstones that you can't say, okay, we're going to take the same basic flavor, you know, cool music, great packaging, really neat shows, and then, but, you know, maybe a slightly different set, and then run that in another country. Like Toonami worked fine in South America, and it worked fine. Like you said, whole channel in Asia. This is totally viable in a way that, and maybe Adult Swim, you'd almost have to, you know, the problem is you can't license it the way you license something like that. You have to say, like, you need your own Mike Lazo, who's, you know, can do the same sort of cultural insight and so on and so forth. And for the amount of effort that you're going to put into it and the amount you're going to change it, why are you going to call it Adult Swim?
Exactly. That's kind of the whole thing here. It's like if you're gonna try and recreate this block, you have to pretty much do it wholesale, or it's not going to work. And
I also wonder if maybe other countries just have a better dose of weird programming already available to them. Like in the UK, like we've brought over a lot of the UK's weird shows to run on Adult Swim, right?
Yep.
They're not really doing that.
They're not doing that as much, but the fact of the matter is that that's kind of stuff is available there, and it almost has a cultural tradition. In like UK, I'd say like that's definitely there. Stuff like Monty Python and all like that informs the Adult Swim, you know, skewed look at culture in a way. But that means like they've had that for 50 years now, 55 years now.
Well, it's funny because a lot of those Channel 4 shows like Dark Place and The Mighty Boosh, that's also something that kind of falls between the cracks on Canadian TV, at least.
Yeah, no, it's weird that Canadian TV doesn't get a better clip of UK programming, because that would in some ways be easier to...
well, we do get a better clip of UK programming overall, I would say. But
we don't get any of the weird stuff.
And yet the subversive stuff.
And yet it's the subversive stuff would probably play better in Canada by percentage than it would in the States. There are certain places in the States where that stuff does fantastically. Like Seattle has always had an incredible love of weird British television, going back to the fact that the Seattle PBS station outbid the Sci-Fi Network for like season 6 of Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
You know, like that's unbelievable. But, you know, like, you know, there are spots where it works brilliantly in the US, but there tend to be the more, in a sense, European-ish in some ways spots, I guess, of America. So you'd think this stuff there would be an incentive to say this is reasonably inexpensive to pick up. Let's give it a go. Especially with all the format breaking we've got here recently with, you know, like Much is basically a comedy network clone in the evenings now. It's like, well, you can run other stuff. I mean, we'll put it this way, if you're going to run Children's Hospital, you've got sky's the limit. You might as well, you can get weirder.
Yeah, every now and then over here, TBS tries to run Adult Swim stuff. They've run Robot Chicken, they've run Children's Hospital, and after a while they just end up giving up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that does never stick on TBS. TBS, I mean, they try to basically port the whole block at one point. Straight up.
They did.
Yeah, that's another thing. Adult Swim shows never seem to get syndicated elsewhere.
I think a lot of them aren't long enough.
Yeah, that's a length for a lot of stuff. I mean, now to be fair, you'd think Aqua Teen Hunger Force at infinity, Jesus goddamn how many episodes?
We still only gotten 4 seasons of it.
Yeah, we've only got we've got 4 seasons of Aqua Teen Hunger Force up here, and they're on like season 12 or whatever. Like, I don't even know.
Oh, it just finished. It's over.
It's finally. So now would be a good time maybe to run the rest of it.
Yeah. Could I do want to bring up that the one show that does manage to get like traction globally everywhere easily with like no problems at all is the Boondocks.
Yeah.
That
ran at Japanese TV dubbed, which is amazing.
It runs. I don't know if it still runs on Animax Asia, but it did for a long time, and it like pretty much any country that has like working television has aired the Boondocks.
Now, is
somewhere.
that on Sony or is that on Cartoon Network though? Because
Well,
Sony's incredibly aggressive with their marketing in a way that So if it's all Sony,
it's all Sony.
Yeah, no, and I think that does sort of put it really back at the feet of Cartoon Network. Because there's stuff that they have that, Rick and Morty, they don't have enough episodes necessarily to do that yet, but if they're not going to use it as a linchpin on Adult Swim Canada, they certainly should be able to very quickly sell it to, put it this way, considering you've got stuff that's running basically at the same time as it's running on Comedy Central. So here's Viacom making a deal such that they're getting this content to air in Canada very quickly. I do not see why the same action can't be made for something like Rick and Morty such that it's airing in Canada very quickly, albeit maybe not on your Cartoon Network. And maybe that's one of the confusions now is like, we know that we've got coming up this huge push because we're suddenly going to have all this visibility. We need to save stuff up. But even if that's been the long-term game plan, they still may not know how to make the brand work because they certainly aren't making the hype work in the way that everybody who's involved in Adult Swim, both on the Adult Swim side and certainly on the Toonami side, there's a sense of how to make this stuff hype and cool and engaging that's absent. Just absent.
Yeah.
Maybe they just need Jason DeMarco's taste in music.
That would, and the thing is, there are they could even do. I mean, that's the thing is, there's some stuff that you could actually technically cheat on or localize. That hey, there's lots of great CanCon bands that you could use to like have cool, dope music in the background of your bumps. There is no shortage of that.
What's really baffling with Rick and Morty, I mean, everybody knows this show is a huge hit.
It actually beat True Detective 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah,
which is like that's brutal. That's brutal because
the one it lost to was the finale, which is understandable why it would lose to that.
Yeah, but I mean, granted, by the time people are listening to the show, it's entirely possible that Adult Swim Canada will have announced Rick and Morty or something. But I mean, regardless, from our context right now, I mean, there is no way that Teletoon or other networks aren't trying to get Rick and Morty. But why has nobody gotten it? Like, why is Turner just hoarding it? Why would they hoard that's what it feels like. It feels like they're hoarding this content.
Well, it's like it's hoarding or ignoring, neither of which makes a lot of sense because Canada is like, it's another 10% on top of your bottom line by population. So if you can sell it for a tenth of what you already did, you added that. You put yourself that much more in the black or got yourself that much more out of the red. But if, or otherwise you're trying to extort a market that, again, may only be as much as an extra 10%. Like, and if you think, like, we're going to charge you this much for it, and, like, it's not that many people, man. You can't get more headcount-wise out of this.
But you don't see this problem with other American content, though, is the thing. Like,
yeah. Like Archer.
Yeah.
Like that runs day and date, doesn't it? When
It does now. Again, Teletoon, I suspect, is shelling out a lot of money to run that one day and date. It doesn't get ratings that are nearly as good as Rick and Morty. It does. I think Kill la Kill got better ratings than a lot of Archer episodes did.
And we don't get that either.
It almost seems like just within. I don't know if this is a corporate Turner thing or like the people who run Adult Swim are they only concerned about having this kind of weird subversive impact on American TV, and could it be that they just couldn't care less about spreading it internationally? I'm
not even sure if Turner's necessarily happy that they've got Adult Swim. Like, I think in some ways, like, I'm sure that this is the fact that this has done so well and makes them so much money drives them nuts because it also spits it is a big fuck you to literally pretty much everything else they do. If everything else is about trying to find very specific, patterns like, TNT, we are drama, TBS is comedy, and we're going to fit these things into these very traditional American boxes. And here's like the only thing that they've got that has any traction with millennials is crazy.
Yeah.
And just and very directly saying all this crap that you have to put up with is nonsense. If nothing else, even if they love it, they also have to be just worried about like, well, then where's our next move here? Because no next move here is obvious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. American TV is like, it's just so culturally imperialistic in just the way it's distributed, and it just kind of becomes the default way to do television, or the default way that you look at television content in all these different countries. And Adult Swim goes against that so much.
Right. Well, no, it's like, I mean, the U.S. as default, even when you're saying we're going to make it a new show for a specific audience, for a specific culture, that's how Disney says, like, you know, we're not going to do the sweet life of whoever. We'll do the sweet life, but we'll set it in India. And it's the same show, just done in Hindi. With like little Hindi, kids instead, and you're just like, what? But you didn't actually culturally consider anything at all. You just did the same show.
Yeah, it's still conforming to that kind of model. But...
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like it's even. I mean, I guess sometimes it's even more imperialistic when they try to be accommodating, and Adult Swim's never accommodating, and to the extent to which they were. To the extent to which Adult Swim held back, it was, what, we don't want to run any of these fan servicey animes. We're, that's our art stuff. And now they're kind of even breaking with that and saying, like, screw it, we're going to run crazy exploitative stuff there. We don't care. We're going to go all in. So you run Dead Man Wonderland and, like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Even though I love that show. Like, it's the right balance of violence and fan service in my book. But the ethic that gets you to run that, I'm not sure if it exists. If you're going to do that on a block in a different place, it can't be as we're emulating something. It has to be because you say that's the block I want to make. At which point, okay, in a sense, you're of the Adult Swim ethic, but you don't necessarily have to call it Adult Swim at that point either.
I also have, I guess this is more for Corey because he's the only one of the three of us that's able to watch Adult Swim on a regular basis. I did catch a little bit of it the last time I was in the States, and people in Canada really want the content. I mean, it's kind of funny when you go on the Adult Swim Canada Facebook page, almost every post is flooded with people demanding Toonami. I mean,
even their latest one. It's like the third comment down for the announcement for Night Sweats.
Yeah,
it's like, so where's Toonami? Yeah, the Night Sweats original show actually, in some ways, paying attention to this block by providing original content, even. But where is us just getting Naruto?
Yeah, it's just funny because I think even if Adult Swim Canada delivered what it really should be giving us, which is, day and date premieres of Adult Swim originals moving forward, which honestly they really should be doing it. I really hope that we're not far away from that. People are still just going to be demanding Toonami.
Yeah, until the day it comes or doesn't come. Yeah. That's just always going to be on their Facebook page.
I mean, whether you want the AS originals or whether you want Toonami, and I mean, I think a lot of us want both. Are people in other countries or specifically in Canada? Do we think the grass is greener? Because you hear a lot of people saying that Adult Swim has gone down the shitter.
People said Adult Swim was going down the shitter like a year after the block was on the air.
That's true. I think that
4 nights a week. How dare they?
It's so funny. People got sick of the text cards so fast, whereas I still think it's like one of the most brilliant kind of novel things that a TV network has ever done.
There were people when the text cards, when they switched from the swim bumpers to the text cards. I remember like vividly people complaining on the Adult Swim forums. Both the like Toon Zone and then like other forums, they were really upset that they would dare change this thing. It had been around for like no time at all.
But I mean, when I saw Adult Swim, I noticed that like from 8 p.m. when it now starts until basically midnight, it was mostly Fox reruns. And
that's still the case with like one exception here and there. Like 8 p.m. Saturday, they play Dragon Ball Z Kai.
Yeah,
right.
And for a little bit they played One Piece at 8:30, but that didn't work out.
Yeah, for 4 weeks.
I admire that they gave it a chance. I really do, because they clearly really like that show.
More people watch it at 2:30 a.m.
Yeah, but I know like all the good stuff is pushed back. I mean, I think really the good stuff on Adult Swim is, even in the States, you could argue, less popular than the stuff that kind of pays the bills, which is the Fox acquisitions.
Yeah, and in that case, they really behave like your general basic cable network.
Absolutely.
Where they you take your big hits from network television like Big Bang Theory and The Office, as cable has done since the inception of cable, and put those put multiple episodes, stack them up in your like primetime hours, and put them in front of your big original premiere shows.
Well,
But in the case of Adult Swim, a lot of people refer to them as Fox shows, understandably, because the only major over-the-air network that does cartoons is Fox. And even then, like, Adult Swim has tried to pick up a show from ABC or NBC, and the ones from the WB, but all those lasted a season.
Well, the only one of those that stuck for them was Home Movies, and that was because they were able to pick up that season, and it was cheap to finish it up.
Well, that show was owned, or is, by the studio that made it, as opposed to the network, Soup to Nuts, right. Which, rest in peace, Soup to Nuts. They just closed their doors recently.
Yep.
So
I guess I bet Scholastic still owns the IP Home Movies.
Really?
Yeah. On a series of children's books written by Brendan Small.
No, by Coach McGurk.
Here's how you get your life together, kids. Wait. Those would just sound like Bob Belcher talking to his children at that point. Just basically be the advice he's giving to Tina. No, I mean, on one hand, I'm there's that aspect of they very much operate like a regular network from 8 to 12.
To the point where they even don't have cards from 8 to 11. They just have.
I noticed that too.
Mm-hmm. They do these visuals where they add Photoshop. I hate to say Photoshop because it's a movie.
After Effects.
After Effects in the Adult Swim logo somewhere while they play a beat over it, which it's either Run the Jewels, Death Grips, or something else. That's always what they use in those.
Well, to be fair, that choice is still pretty countercultural for US TV. Just even that little aesthetic is different relative to anything else you're going to see, and is more interesting packaging than what they get on Fox. Well, Fox isn't going to put Death Grips on in between The Simpsons. That'd be amazing, but it's never going to happen.
No,
they should have the Death Grips cover The Simpsons intro as one of their special guest openings. Just saying, that'd be great. But there is that aspect of they do very much do some pay the bills stuff. I mean, that's why they killed Toonami for a while, because guess what? You had to pay the bills for a while to make things work. Why did they let anime fall by the wayside? Well, honestly, for a while there actually really wasn't a deep library of stuff that they could have run. In a sense, that being off the air for a chunk of time let things charge back up. There's a bit of buffer here. The industry got back on its feet from the production side. You couldn't have done it then, and
there wasn't a whole lot worth airing in the late aughts, honestly.
Yeah, no, there wasn't.
The Bionics watching audience. I mean, if you haven't watched anything since, you haven't missed much. Or at least, but between then and 2012 or whatever. I think Modica is when the current kind of
Modica definitely kick things back off.
Yeah, those Blu-rays still sell in Japan. They keep printing Modica Blu-rays.
No, that is that once in a generation show they get there.
Which I watched that show, and I thought it was pretty good, but I had no idea it was such a phenomenon, or that it's being praised as one of the greatest anime series ever made. It's for only a 13 episode, 12, 13? I forget.
It's 12. I mean, it didn't completely blow me away. But it's an impressive show, and it does resonate with people really well.
Gen Oribuchi is you think he's the only anime writer ever. The amount of times he's brought up, people never brought up anime writers as much as they did directors. But
he's got other stuff. He's got other stuff in his catalog to kind of justify that. When he writes, it's very distinct, and I think to the extent to where previously people didn't notice. Previously, it was, I think, more of a a director border driven thing, and I think he's the first writer of unless you're looking like people like Chiaki Konaka, who if you know of his stuff as a writer, you can pick out in a heartbeat because he's got like 5 tropes that he will bring up at all times.
Yeah, or but, like Keiko Moto, who like yeah, that's another one.
To it though, I mean, getting I guess us back on topic, there are times where Adult Swim has to act like a network. So if there's nothing good in a particular medium for them to air, like put it this way, they wouldn't air that Fox stuff if it wasn't paying bills. Like if it suddenly just like cratered in the ratings, it'd be gone in a week.
Yeah, and that's really one of the big tragedies is that Adult Swim Canada, I mean, technically everything they air is an acquisition. I mean, apart from Crash Canyon and now Night Sweats, but I mean, they don't prioritize that content. They are a acquisition based company, so they would have more flexibility to if they had this whole library than the American counterpart does as well. So it's just it's just kind of being squandered.
Well, it's tough because there's an aspect of they're in a position where they could take the half-hour stuff that they would have direct out of if they could have straight up access to Cartoon Network's library. If they could add to that a few smaller acquisitions, like Boondocks would probably be easier for them to air than, I mean, unless they're allowed to shift around some of the Fox stuff they've already technically owned.
Actually, that's weird because Adult Swim Canada actually, despite the fact that you just go through Sony as a separate process, they have not aired Boondocks yet.
Yeah, and Boondocks would be I mean, in general, there's not a lot of content on Canadian television that is anything close to the Boondocks. Like we don't even have like a rap block anymore on much.
No. Well, I mean even I mean BET is just the American network wholesale. And it's kind of strange that Boondocks was one of the few shows we got because it's usually the black shows on Adult Swim that seem to not have the hardest time getting traction outside of the States too.
Which I'm surprised that you haven't aired Black Jesus yet because one of the creators is the creator of Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah, I want to see Black Jesus.
It's and that's the thing. And the thing is, there is another thing where it's like okay, so you want to sell it to somebody else, but it sells itself to somebody else because you can say in Canada from one of the creators of Trailer Park Boys, and that's how you're going to tag the ad on Much or wherever if you're not going to run it straight up on Cartoon Network Canada. Like, if you're not going to run it on AS Canada, well, here's how you run it literally anywhere else that runs comedy here, and yet absent.
I know earlier I asked if you wanted to bring up any other like anime-related stuff like Toonami.
Everyone always gravitates to Toonami whenever the topic of Adult Swim comes up. Like you see it on the Facebook page.
Oh yeah, totally.
I still believe that there's proportionally more demand for anime in Canada in a lot of ways, just because the whole culture kind of developed differently, and there's been nothing for so long that there's just going to be more of a thirst. And I do honestly think that there's enough room in this country for 2 networks to run an anime block.
It would be nice to have any.
Yeah,
I guess really that's the thing though is like here's the real tragedy of Adult Swim Canada is there's actually a pretty damn low bar being set for it. Just day and date stuff, and honestly, you wouldn't even have to. It would be great to have it packaged as Toonami, but if they just made use of any of that time at all to run anything that was an adult anime show, it would be considered incredibly welcome, and it would be because it's such a vacuum for that content.
Sorry, if I could point out quickly, one of the things is that Toonami in the States they run a series of different shows, obviously, and every now and then they've run movies. But one of the things that Jason DeMarco has actually admitted was that they've tried to get those DC animated movies, but Warner Brothers, another time Warner Company, wants too much money for them, and they do not care that they are part of the same company. Meanwhile, up in Canada, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty much all those movies air on Teletoon.
I believe Teletoon at night has aired pretty much all of them at this point.
Yeah, so they do have the money for those.
Yeah, but they prioritize acquisitions a little differently, so or completely differently. So,
well, and I think there may also be like there may be an incredible difference in the price that Warner is asking Cartoon Network, knowing what they have in their books versus Teletoon. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a good
for
point.
Cartoon Network. Yeah. There's an aspect there of, and I've heard this from I've heard this for a long time out of people who say, why isn't Cartoon Network getting this X done in synergy with name Time Warner related thing here? And again and again, it just loops back to the corporate culture is still very much wired around. You are not a single synergistic unit. You are not Disney, which is now like 20 other things all trying to work together so that you can have build towards Marvel's Disney, Star Wars, Muppet adventure, which would probably be like the best, worst thing ever. But you can never, there will never be the Powerpuff Girls meet Adventure Time meet DC, because the second you added DC, you could have all the Cartoon Network stuff you wanted, but the second you added DC to it, oh no.
I'm sure the Marvel Star Wars Muppet crossover would show up on Disney Channel Canada though. No problem. We would never see the Warner one would never even get made. So
yeah, the Warner one wouldn't exist in the first place.
Yeah, and
I mean that towards that end, that makes even international business toxic, because if everything is another opportunity to instead of, it's in a sense it's the difference between how an established brand acts versus how a Silicon Valley startup acts, and one is saying, we may not make as much money on this, but we've grown our audience and our loyalty from our audience or our user base, and the other says, hey, we gotta make every last time every turn of the dial we want $1. Well, guess what? One of these is going to be kind of limiting. Then it's a spectrum. You can be on one side or the other, but trying to do both, wring every last dollar out of it while creating greater availability and greater synergy. Though you can't make those work together necessarily. At least at the same time. You can do it as a long-term thing, really grow your audience out, and then start being like, now we can really run ads on this, and you make your money in a different way anyways, rather than saying we're going to make it on licensing. You make the licensing, license it cheap and then try and get back end or make it cheap so that you get that exposure, so you get people who then see your show and then buy Blu-rays and buy whatever merch and crap you put out there. Like you see Adult Swim merch up here in places like Spencer's and comic book shops and stuff, but it's all people who probably pirated the show buying it. You're making some money on it, but you're not making the money you should on it.
Like stuff like China, Illinois. Like there is no legal way to watch it outside of the United States. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, in the States, Warner Brothers is the license holder to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and
which will ensure we never get that on Toonami.
Yep. Oh, the irony.
Yeah.
But hey, that would be that would be a nice surprise up here. But I'm not.
That would be amazing. Like that would be the show to launch Toonami Adult Swim.
The anime you get if it winds up being JoJo's.
It's all ours. I can picture it now. Part 4 of JoJo's greenlit specifically because it's a smash hit in Canada. It'll happen. I know it.
New maple syrup attacks added. What? Not even implausible for JoJo's.
Well, hope you enjoyed this episode of Zonan Canada. Thanks to Corey for coming by, and thanks to Karl not only for appearing, but for providing all the music on this show. All of it is taken from his EP, Packet Flood, which you can find at Ultraklystron.com. You can reach me on Twitter, @ZonanCanada, or through the contact form at zonan.ca. Best way to support this show is to spread the word, so if you know anyone who might like it, recommend it to them if you can. As always, see you again.